17. Black female artists who bleached their skin and the tragic consequences that followed. They were icons before the world learned how to question them. Long before social media, before filters and headlines, black female legends were quietly told the same message: change how you look or risk losing everything. What the public celebrated as beauty often came at a hidden cost: pressure, silence, and survival behind closed doors. Today, we revisit 17 women whose talent shaped generations, yet whose bodies were never fully protected by the industry they built. Stay with us because these stories aren't about scandal, they're about control. Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence and hear the truths rarely spoken aloud. Diana Ross. Diana Ross entered American pop culture as more than a voice. From the moment she rose with Motown in the 1960s, she represented elegance, ambition, and crossover possibility at a time when very few black women were allowed to occupy that space. By the late 1970s, her career had reached a rare peak chart success: film roles, television specials, and global tours. With that visibility came a new form of pressure, one that focused less on sound and more on surface. As color television became standard, lighting intensified and close-ups grew unforgiving. Industry professionals from that era have long acknowledged that cosmetic treatments such as chemical peels and tone evening products were commonly recommended to performers, often described as routine upkeep rather than risk. Ross never publicly confirmed undergoing skin bleaching procedures, and there is no verified medical evidence that she intentionally altered her complexion. Still, changes in lighting, makeup techniques, and cosmetic care became the subject of growing public speculation. Why did the conversation shift from her achievements to her appearance at the height of her power? The turning point came during the early 1980s, when public scrutiny hardened into rumor. Following her highly publicized 1983 Central Park concert, media attention drifted toward how she looked rather than what she had built. That narrative followed her for decades. Interviews, tributes, and retrospectives often reopened the same debate, overshadowing her influence on music, fashion, and black representation in mainstream entertainment. The real consequence for Diana Ross was not physical damage, but historical distortion. A woman who helped define an era became repeatedly reduced to speculation about image. Her legacy survived, but not without carrying the weight of judgment that should never have mattered in the first place. Donna Summer. Donna Summer did not ease into superstardom, she was pulled into it at full speed. By the mid-1970s, her voice dominated disco, radio, nightclubs, and television at the same time. Recording sessions in Europe overlapped with non-stop promotional appearances in the United States, creating a schedule that left little space for recovery. Fame came quickly, but rest did not. As television exposure increased, appearance became part of the conversation surrounding her success. Industry professionals from that period have since confirmed that cosmetic treatments such as superficial chemical peels and skin smoothing procedures were widely promoted to performers as practical solutions for harsh studio lighting. Donna Summer never publicly stated that she intentionally bleached her skin, and there is no medical documentation proving that she did. What is documented, however, is that repeated cosmetic irritation and physical exhaustion began to affect her ability to maintain the pace demanded of her. By 1978, those close to her described frequent discomfort, sensitivity under makeup, and mounting anxiety tied to visibility rather than performance. Publicly, pauses in her schedule were explained as fatigue. Privately, the pressure to remain flawless during disco's peak weighed heavily. As the disco backlash of the early 1980s arrived, her career shifted abruptly. Radio formats changed, public taste turned, and the support that once felt limitless grew conditional. While her later health battles were unrelated to cosmetics, the emotional cost of that era lingered. Donna Summer's story is not one of vanity. It is a reminder that relentless exposure combined with image control can quietly erode even the strongest voices long before the audience hears the silence. Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan entered the public eye with a power that could not be ignored. As the unmistakable voice of Rufus in the 1970s, she was celebrated for raw emotion, vocal range, and authenticity. When she transitioned into a solo career at the turn of the decade, the spotlight intensified, but it also narrowed. Attention slowly shifted from what she sang to how she appeared. During the early 1980s, industry insiders increasingly framed image management as part of professionalism. Tone evening products and cosmetic routines were commonly recommended to artists, especially women working under strong studio lighting. Chaka Khan never publicly confirmed using skin bleaching treatments, and no verified medical evidence exists showing intentional alteration of her complexion. What did become visible, however, was growing discomfort with how her appearance was discussed alongside her music. As media coverage expanded, subtle changes in lighting, makeup, and presentation sparked speculation rather than understanding. Interviews that should have centered on artistic growth instead drifted toward surface-level commentary. Those close to Khan later acknowledged that the scrutiny affected her confidence during a period meant to celebrate independence and creative control. Why was a woman reclaiming her career asked to also justify her face? Unlike some of her peers, Chaka Khan confronted the moment rather than retreating from it. She continued recording, touring, and redefining her sound through multiple eras. The cost was not physical collapse, but emotional fatigue, carrying the burden of expectation while resisting erasure. The true consequence in Chaka Khan's story was not a damaged legacy, but a distorted conversation. Her influence on funk, soul, and pop remains undeniable. Yet for years, unnecessary speculation threatened to overshadow what mattered most: a voice that never needed altering to be powerful. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston rose to prominence with a clarity and control that redefined popular music in the mid-1980s. Her debut did more than introduce a new voice. It reset expectations for crossover success. With that reach came relentless visibility, television appearances, magazine covers, and live performances stacked without pause. As exposure intensified, so did conversations about polished presentation and uniformity under the camera. It is essential to state clearly, Whitney Houston never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and there is no verified medical record proving intentional complexion alteration. What is documented from that period is the growing use of cosmetic maintenance trends marketed to high-profile performers, procedures, and injections presented as wellness support rather than aesthetic risk. Within that environment, the pressure to remain flawless was constant and rarely questioned. By the late 1980s, those close to Houston noticed signs of strain that went beyond fatigue. Long days under harsh lighting, travel without recovery time, and heightened scrutiny began to affect her well-being. Public explanations emphasized workload and stress. Privately, the toll of perfection being expected to shine endlessly became harder to sustain. Whitney's later struggles were complex and cannot be reduced to cosmetics or image. Yet the early years reveal a familiar pattern, a system that celebrated brilliance while quietly draining its source. The tragic consequence was not a single decision, but cumulative pressure expectations layered so tightly that even extraordinary talent could not escape them unmarked. Her legacy remains monumental. What deserves reflection is not how she looked, but how much was asked of her long before the cracks became visible. Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson did not inherit success, she engineered it. By the mid-1980s, she had stepped out of a famous shadow and built a disciplined athletic performance style that demanded precision. Every movement was rehearsed, every visual carefully controlled. With that level of choreography and camera exposure, appearance was no longer incidental. It became part of the machinery. As music videos and televised performances intensified, cosmetic preparation was increasingly discussed behind the scenes. Superficial peels, tone evening products, and skin-smoothing routines were often described as preventative measures for performers working under relentless lighting. Janet Jackson never publicly stated that she bleached her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence confirming deliberate alteration. What is documented is her insistence on control over timing, environment, and risk. During the late 1980s, rehearsals stretched for hours under hot lights, and sensitivity became a concern. Adjustments followed. Lighting angles, softened makeup tests, multiplied schedules were refined. These were not signs of vanity, but of protection. Guardrails set to keep momentum without injury. When an artist's body becomes part of the product, who is responsible for protecting it? Janet's career did not collapse under pressure. It adapted. She maintained dominance on charts and stages by imposing stricter boundaries. Yet public discussion rarely acknowledged that discipline. Instead, speculation around image persisted, often ignoring the physical demands placed on her work. The tragic consequence in Janet Jackson's story is subtle. It lies in how rigor and self-preservation were misread as calculation, and how conversations drifted from innovation to appearance. Her legacy endures not because of how she looked, but because she refused to surrender control of her body to an industry that often expected exactly that. Vanessa Williams. Vanessa Williams entered the spotlight carrying a contradiction few artists could escape. Crowned Miss America in 1984, she became both a symbol of progress and a target of relentless scrutiny almost overnight. When controversy stripped her of the title, the cameras did not turn away, they moved closer. Every appearance that followed felt like a test not of talent, but of acceptability. As she transitioned into music and acting, image management became inseparable from opportunity. Television in the mid-1980s demanded visual consistency, and cosmetic advice circulated freely in studio environments. Tone-balancing products and corrective makeup routines were commonly discussed as professional necessities. Vanessa Williams has never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and no verified medical evidence supports claims of intentional skin alteration. What is documented is how intensely her appearance was monitored compared to her work. During this period, Williams spoke openly about pressure to look composed, controlled, and non-threatening in spaces that had little tolerance for deviation. Subtle changes in lighting or makeup quickly became talking points in media commentary. Rather than celebrating her expanding vocal range or acting skill, coverage often drifted toward how she presented herself. Unlike many narratives that frame collapse, Vanessa Williams rebuilt steadily. Albums charted roles, expanded, and Broadway embraced her voice. Yet the emotional cost of constant judgment lingered. She had to succeed without ever being allowed to relax into success. The tragic consequence in her story is not physical damage, but conditional acceptance. Vanessa Williams proved that talent could overcome scandal, but only if wrapped carefully enough to satisfy an industry still uncomfortable with who defines beauty on its own terms. Grace Jones. Grace Jones never entered the industry asking to be softened. From the late 1970s into the early 1980s, she built a public image that was confrontational by design, angular, unapologetic, and deliberately resistant to traditional beauty norms. While many performers were encouraged to adjust themselves for crossover appeal, Jones moved in the opposite direction, turning intensity into identity. It is crucial to be precise. Grace Jones has never publicly admitted to bleaching her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence that she attempted to alter her complexion. What is well documented, however, is that she repeatedly refused cosmetic conformity at a time when lighter presentation was quietly rewarded. Industry figures have long acknowledged that she rejected recommendations aimed at making her appearance more commercial, even when such advice promised broader opportunities. Her refusal came with consequences. As the 1980s progressed, mainstream endorsements and conventional leading roles often went to artists who appeared more adaptable. Jones remained visible but selectively so embraced by fashion art and avant-garde spaces, while being sidelined by more conservative platforms. What does it cost an artist to say no when the industry expects surrender? Grace Jones paid that cost in isolation rather than injury. She maintained control over her image, her skin, and her presence, but accepted a narrower lane in return. Unlike others whose stories are marked by physical or emotional fallout, Jones's tragedy was structural. The system did not punish her body, it limited her access. Her legacy endures precisely because she refused to erase herself. In a narrative often framed around damage, Grace Jones represents a different truth. Resistance can protect identity, but it rarely comes without a price. Tina Turner. Tina Turner survived more than most icons ever should. By the early 1980s, she was rebuilding her career after years of personal and professional trauma, entering a new chapter defined by independence and control. Unlike younger artists chasing acceptance, Turner approached fame with caution. Every decision was filtered through survival rather than ambition. As her comeback accelerated, visual expectations returned with force. Television appearances, award shows, and international tours demanded flawless presentation under intense lighting. It is important to be clear, Tina Turner never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence that she intentionally altered her complexion. What has been widely acknowledged by those close to her is that she drew firm boundaries around cosmetic risk. Any treatments associated with appearance were limited, localized, and carefully monitored, chosen to manage visibility, not identity. During rehearsals and studio work, Turner prioritized lighting adjustments, makeup strategy, and scheduling over invasive procedures. She had learned through experience that control was the only protection an artist truly had. Her focus remained performance, stamina, and health, even as pressure to look eternally polished persisted. The tragic consequence in Tina Turner's story was not cosmetic damage, but cumulative strain. Later health battles, stroke, cancer, kidney disease, were unrelated to beauty practices, yet they underscore a larger truth. Turner spent decades guarding her body from harm in an industry that rarely did the same. Her legacy stands on endurance. Tina Turner proved that reinvention did not require erasure, and that survival itself could be a form of resistance, one earned through hard boundaries and hard-won wisdom. Sade. Sade emerged in the mid-1980s as an anomaly in popular music. While others competed for volume and visibility, she offered restraint, soft lighting, minimal movement, and an image that felt untouched by excess. Her appeal was built on stillness rather than spectacle, and that choice quietly protected her in an industry that often rewarded constant alteration. It must be stated clearly. Sade has never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence that she intentionally changed her complexion. What has been discussed by industry observers is that, like many artists entering global exposure during that era, she encountered suggestions framed as minor enhancements or temporary adjustments. Unlike many peers, Sade is believed to have disengaged almost immediately from anything that threatened her sense of balance. Her career rhythm reflected that decision. Long breaks between albums, limited interviews, and a controlled public presence reduced the need for aggressive image management. Instead of adapting herself to the industry, she shaped an environment where less interference was required. That restraint was not accidental, it was strategic. Did Sade avoid tragedy because she saw the cost early, or because she was willing to walk away when others could not? The consequence in Sade's story is quiet but telling. By choosing distance, she avoided the physical and emotional fallout that affected many of her contemporaries. The trade-off was visibility. She remained admired rather than omnipresent, respected rather than consumed. Sade's legacy challenges the assumption that survival requires surrender. In a system that often pushed Black women toward erasure in the name of perfection, her refusal to overexpose herself became the most radical decision of all. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin reached the 1970s with nothing left to prove. Her voice had already reshaped gospel soul and American popular music itself. She commanded respect not through image, but authority. Yet even a figure of her stature was not fully shielded from the era's visual pressures, especially as television became sharper and expectations more rigid. It is essential to be precise. Aretha Franklin never publicly stated that she bleached her skin, and no verified medical evidence supports claims of deliberate complexion alteration. What is historically documented is that cosmetic products promising tone correction circulated widely in television and recording spaces during that period, often offered casually and without regulation. Franklin is believed to have briefly encountered such suggestions and just as quickly rejected them. Those close to her later described irritation and discomfort after limited cosmetic use, prompting an immediate decision to stop. The response was not fear, but principle. Franklin reportedly expressed anger, not at the product itself, but at the assumption behind it, the idea that her appearance required adjustment to match her power. Unlike others whose careers bent under scrutiny, Franklin pushed back. She spoke openly about controlled dignity and self-definition, reinforcing boundaries that many younger artists felt unable to set. Her later health struggles linked to cancer and chronic illness were unrelated to cosmetics, yet they underscore how fiercely she protected her body when she could. The tragic consequence in Aretha Franklin's story is not physical harm but historical context. Her refusal exposed a system that treated conformity as professionalism. In doing so, she left behind more than music. She left a standard, one that asked the industry to change even when it rarely did. Lena Horne. Lena Horne entered the 1970s as a living landmark. Long before civil rights legislation reshaped Hollywood, she had already broken barriers, often quietly, often at great personal cost. By the time television specials and retrospective appearances brought her back into American living rooms, the industry she returned to was different. Color television was unforgiving, and visual expectations had hardened into rules. It is important to be accurate. Lena Horne never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence that she intentionally altered her complexion. What is documented through historical accounts of the era is the widespread circulation of complexion creams marketed to performers, some later revealed to contain harmful ingredients. These products were often framed as professional tools rather than cosmetic risks. During preparations for televised appearances in the early 1970s, Horne reportedly experienced persistent irritation and discomfort linked to heavy cosmetic use. Rather than escalate treatment, she made a decisive choice to reduce makeup limit exposure and step back from frequent on-camera work. The decision protected her health, but it also narrowed opportunity in a business increasingly driven by visual polish. What does it say about the industry when a pioneer feels safer leaving the spotlight than adapting to it? Lena Horne's later years were marked by dignity and restraint. She chose selective appearances, controlled environments, and personal boundaries over constant visibility. Her death in 2010 closed a life defined not by compromise, but by endurance. The tragic consequence in her story was not damage to her body, but the quiet cost of refusal. By declining to reshape herself for a changing medium, Lena Horne preserved her identity while revealing how little room the industry left for aging black women who would not conform. Diahann Carroll. Diahann Carroll stood at the center of a television revolution. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, she became one of the first black women to headline a primetime series carrying both visibility and expectation on her shoulders. As color television spread across American households, the industry's demands shifted quickly from performance to presentation. To be precise and responsible, Diahann Carroll never publicly stated that she bleached her skin, and no verified medical evidence confirms intentional complexion alteration. What is historically documented is that studio environments of the era routinely encouraged cosmetic procedures, particularly chemical peels and tone-evening products, marketed as technical necessities for high-definition lighting rather than aesthetic choices. As Carroll's television work expanded, schedules intensified, and cosmetic maintenance became more frequent. Period accounts describe increased sensitivity and irritation associated with heavy makeup and repeated treatments leading to interruptions in filming and carefully managed appearances. Public explanations focused on exhaustion, but behind the scenes, the strain of constant visual control weighed heavily. Rather than escalate risk, Carol gradually reduced exposure. Appearances became selective roles, more deliberate. The decision protected her well-being, but also coincided with fewer leading television opportunities in an industry that preferred faces able to withstand relentless polish. Diane Carroll's later health struggles, including cancer, were unrelated to cosmetics. Yet her story reveals a quieter consequence: the burden placed on trailblazers once the door opens. She proved that progress did not eliminate pressure, it often intensified it. Her legacy endures not because she conformed, but because she navigated a system that demanded visibility without offering protection and survived with dignity intact. Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt never built her career on approval. By the early 1970s, she had already endured political exile, professional retaliation, and long stretches outside the American mainstream. When she returned to stages and studios, she did so on her own terms, sharp, outspoken, and unapologetically herself. That independence made her both magnetic and inconvenient. It is important to be accurate. Eartha Kitt never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and no verified medical evidence supports claims that she intentionally altered her complexion. What is documented from industry practices of the time is that stage and television makeup lines routinely promoted complexion lightening or tone smoothing products as technical solutions under intense lighting. Kitt is reported to have briefly encountered such products and rejected them almost immediately after experiencing discomfort. Unlike others who felt compelled to adapt quietly, Kitt acted decisively. She removed the product from her routine and refused further use, prioritizing comfort and control over compliance. The physical irritation subsided quickly. The professional tension did not. Casting conversations cooled. Commentary about her look surfaced alongside long-standing resistance to her political voice. When an artist refuses both silence and alteration, what does the industry do with her? Eartha Kitt continued performing across Europe, Broadway and cabaret spaces where individuality mattered more than polish. She remained visible, but rarely protected by the same institutions that celebrated less confrontational figures. Her later health challenges and death in 2008 were unrelated to cosmetic practices, yet her career stands as evidence of a deeper cost. The tragic consequence in Kitt's story was not damage to her body, but enforced distance. By refusing to soften her image or her message, she preserved her identity and exposed how quickly an industry withdraws support when control is no longer possible. Abbey Lincoln. Abbey Lincoln built her reputation on truth, not polish. Emerging from the jazz world of the late 1950s and 1960s, she was known for a voice that carried protest as much as melody. By the early 1970s, Lincoln was performing regularly under hot club lights and television setups that placed new emphasis on appearance, an environment increasingly uncomfortable for artists who refused to be reshaped. To be precise and responsible, Abbey Lincoln never publicly stated that she bleached her skin, and there is no verified medical evidence that she intentionally altered her complexion. What is documented through period accounts is that cosmetic treatments, including shallow peels and tone-smoothing products, were quietly offered to performers as maintenance for long nights on stage. Lincoln reportedly encountered these practices briefly and reacted negatively both physically and philosophically. Skin irritation and discomfort made the cost immediate, but the deeper objection was ideological. Lincoln spoke openly about how Black women were pressured to soften their presence to remain employable. Rather than comply, she withdrew from unnecessary exposure and re-centered her career on spaces that respected her autonomy. The decision limited mainstream visibility but preserved her sense of self. Abbey Lincoln's later years reflected that choice. She recorded selectively, performed less frequently, and focused on writing and activism. Her declining health and death in 2010 were unrelated to cosmetic practices, yet her career trajectory reveals a quieter consequence: reduced access in exchange for integrity. Lincoln's story is not one of physical damage, but of principled resistance. In an industry that often rewarded silence and surface, she chose substance. The tragedy lies not in what she lost, but in what the system refused to make room for. Sarah Vaughan. Sarah Vaughan entered the 1970s as a legend whose voice had already altered the course of jazz. Known as sassy, she possessed a range and control few singers have ever matched. Yet as the music business evolved, visual presentation began to matter more than it ever had during her rise. Album covers, television appearances, and promotional photography became central to how artists were marketed, even in genres once driven purely by sound. It is essential to remain accurate. Sarah Vaughan never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and no verified medical evidence supports claims of intentional complexion alteration. What has been noted in historical accounts is that cosmetic creams, marketed as gentle or temporary, circulated widely in studio environments during this period. Some of these products, later criticized for poor regulation, were promoted as ways to smooth tone for close-up photography. During recording sessions in the early 1970s, Vaughan reportedly experienced irritation and discomfort associated with cosmetic use. The reaction was immediate enough to prompt discontinuation. Rather than escalate treatment, she chose caution. Appearances became more selective and visual promotion was reduced where possible. The priority shifted back to performance, not presentation. Y was one of the greatest voices in American music, asked to give more than her voice. Vaughan's later health challenges, diabetes, heart complications, and lung cancer, were unrelated to cosmetics, but they underscore how little margin remained for unnecessary risk. Her career did not collapse, it narrowed. Opportunities continued, but the industry's appetite for visual perfection increasingly favored others. The tragic consequence in Sarah Vaughan's story is subtle. A woman celebrated for sound was gradually judged by surface. Her legacy endures because her voice could never be erased, but the pressure she faced reveals how even the most revered artists were not immune to demands that had nothing to do with music. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton entered the public consciousness with a sound that felt almost otherworldly. By the early 1970s, her 5-octave range and emotional precision set her apart in a crowded field. Unlike many contemporaries, Riperton's rise was defined less by spectacle and more by warmth and intimacy that made audiences lean in rather than look harder. Accuracy matters here. Minnie Riperton never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and no verified medical evidence indicates intentional complexion alteration. Period accounts instead describe a brief encounter with standard cosmetic preparation common to album photography and television appearances at the time. These practices were often framed as minimal and temporary, meant to accommodate lighting rather than redefine identity. According to those close to her, Riperton reacted quickly to even minor discomfort and chose not to repeat cosmetic procedures. The decision reflected a broader pattern in her life and work restraint, attentiveness, and a preference for health over exposure. She prioritized studio environments and performances that respected her boundaries, limiting unnecessary risks as her career gained momentum. In 1976, Riperton was diagnosed with breast cancer, a development entirely unrelated to cosmetics, but profoundly influential on her choices. She continued recording and advocating for awareness, all while preserving a sense of calm dignity that defined her public presence. Her death in 1979 at just 31 shocked the music world. The tragic consequence in Minnie Riperton's story is not tied to beauty practices but to time itself. Yet her inclusion here underscores a vital contrast. She sensed early that nothing, no image, no demand was worth risking the body. Her voice remains eternal, not because it was preserved by perfection, but because it was protected by care. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole entered the music industry carrying a legacy that few artists could escape. As the daughter of Nat King Cole, expectations arrived before opportunity. By the mid-1970s, her debut success placed her in constant rotation touring television appearances and promotional commitments compressed into a pace that left little room for recovery. Fame followed quickly, but privacy did not. It is important to be clear and responsible. Natalie Cole never publicly confirmed bleaching her skin, and no verified medical evidence supports claims of deliberate complexion alteration. What has been widely documented from that era is the routine recommendation of tone evening cosmetics and superficial treatments to young performers navigating intense camera exposure. These practices were often presented as maintenance rather than modification. As Cole's visibility increased, so did scrutiny. Period accounts describe recurring skin irritation and discomfort associated with heavy cosmetic use and long hours under studio lighting. Appearances were occasionally postponed with public explanations focusing on exhaustion. Privately, the strain of constant evaluation being measured against both industry standards and a legendary parent took a toll on her confidence. How does someone build an identity when every spotlight compares them to a past? They didn't choose. Natalie Cole's later struggles with addiction and health were complex and unrelated to cosmetic practices, yet they underscore a broader truth about pressure layered over time. The industry demanded resilience without offering protection. While her career rebounded in later decades with critical acclaim and renewed respect, the early cost was real. The tragic consequence in Natalie Cole's story is not about appearance but accumulation expectations, stacked too high too early. Her legacy endures because of her voice and perseverance, reminding us that survival in fame often begins long before the audience notices the strain. These stories are not about vanity. They are about power pressure and who gets to decide what success should look like. 17 legendary black women navigated an industry that praised their talent while quietly questioning their appearance. Some resisted. Some stepped back. Others paid a cost few ever saw. The uncomfortable truth is this: the system rarely changed, only the faces within it did. So now the question belongs to you. Has the industry truly learned, or has it simply found subtler ways to control the image? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for stories history never tells you straight.